I always thought my marriage with Emma was solid. We'd been together for 6 years, and even though life wasn't always perfect, we always found our way back to each other. At least that's what I thought. It wasn't until a random guy showed up at my door one night that I realized I'd been living a lie. It started like any other Thursday. I came home from work a little later than usual. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the crisp air of early fall brushed against my skin. I walked up to the house, thinking about dinner. Emma had texted earlier, saying she'd be out with some friends, so I figured I'd just heat up some leftovers. As I turned my key in the lock, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. You don't know me, but I know Emma." I froze, staring at the screen. It was the kind of text that could mean a dozen different things, but none of them were good. My first thought was that it had to be a scam or some kind of prank. But as I reread the message, a gnawing feeling in my gut told me there was more to it. Before I could reply, a loud banging on the front door echoed through the house, startling me. I opened the door, and there he was, a guy around my age, maybe a little younger, standing on the front porch with a scowl on his face and fists clenched at his sides. He had a rugged look about him, messy hair, a leather jacket, and a wild look in his eyes. He didn't seem like the kind of guy who just showed up to have a friendly chat. "Are you Tom?" he growled, his voice low and steady. "Yeah. Who are you?" I asked, taken aback by his sudden appearance. "I'm Derek," he spat, "and I'm here because of Emma." The mention of my wife's name sent a chill down my spine. I took a step back, trying to process what was happening. "What about Emma?" I asked, my tone harsher than I intended. "She's been lying to you, man. She's been lying to both of us," he said, stepping closer, his voice rising. "I'm the guy she's been seeing behind your back." I could barely comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, it felt like the ground was about to swallow me up. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. Denial, anger, disbelief. But I quickly snapped back to reality. "Why the hell should I believe you?" I snapped, my voice shaky with rage. "You show up at my house, claim you're involved with my wife, and expect me to just take your word for it?" Derek didn't back down. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and thrust it in front of me. The screen displayed a series of messages between him and Emma. As I skimmed through the texts, my stomach twisted. There were late-night conversations, plans to meet up, and even photos of them together, selfies taken in places Emma had told me she was going for work or with friends. I clenched my jaw, barely able to contain my anger. "Why come here?" I asked, my voice cold. "If you're telling the truth, then why show up at my door like this?" "Because I found out she's married," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She didn't tell me until recently. I didn't know she was lying to me too. I thought you deserved to know." The rage simmered beneath my skin. Part of me wanted to throw him off the porch and tell him to get the hell away from my house. But another part of me, a deeper, darker part, wanted answers. I stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. "Fine," I said. "Start talking." Derek walked inside, glancing around my living room as if trying to get a sense of the life I'd built with Emma. I shut the door behind him and crossed my arms, waiting for him to explain. He took a deep breath and began to tell his story. According to Derek, he had met Emma about 6 months ago at a coffee shop downtown. They'd hit it off instantly, bonding over a shared love of hiking and music. At first, it was innocent, just two people enjoying each other's company. But it quickly turned into something more. He said he had no idea Emma was married, and she'd always been vague about her personal life. "I should have known something was off," he admitted, his eyes dropping to the floor. "But she was just so good at lying. I guess I was too caught up in the excitement to see the signs." I listened in silence as he continued, detailing the moments they'd shared, the places they'd been. Places I'd thought Emma had gone alone. It was like a jigsaw puzzle falling into place, each piece revealing a picture I didn't want to see. By the time Derek finished talking, I was gripping the back of the couch so hard that my knuckles were white. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the casual way Emma had kept up appearances, acting like nothing was wrong while she'd been living a double life. But as I looked at Derek, I could see something else in his eyes. It wasn't just anger or guilt. It was fear. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about Emma. There was something he hadn't told me yet. Something that had driven him to show up at my doorstep, desperate and angry. Before I could press him for more, Derek looked me straight in the eye and said, "There's something else you need to know. Something that might put you in danger." I was already struggling to process everything Derek had told me, but his last words sent a fresh wave of dread coursing through my veins. Something that might put you in danger. It felt like we'd crossed into territory I wasn't prepared for, but I couldn't back down now. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What could possibly put me in danger?" Derek hesitated, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to be lurking outside. "Emma's not just lying to us about her relationship," he said. "She's been involved with some questionable people. She never mentioned you by name, but I overheard a conversation a couple of weeks ago. She was on the phone with someone, and it didn't sound like a casual chat. The guy on the other end was asking about money. Lots of it." I felt a pit form in my stomach. This didn't sound like the Emma I knew. She worked a normal job, went out with her friends. Nothing that would suggest she had any kind of criminal connections. Still, the possibility hung in the air, filling the room with a suffocating tension. "You're telling me she's involved in something illegal?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. "I don't know for sure," Derek admitted, his brow furrowing. "But the way she was talking, it was like she owed this guy something, and he wasn't happy about it." I paced across the living room, my mind spinning in circles. It was hard enough to digest the fact that my wife had been having an affair, but now there was a possibility she was tangled up in something far worse. I turned back to Derek, who was nervously running a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because I'm not exactly clean myself," he replied, his eyes hardening. "If they start digging into Emma, they might find out about some things I've done too. Nothing major, but enough to make my life difficult. And I didn't want to put you in a position where you'd get dragged down with us." I could feel the frustration building inside me. I needed to confront Emma, but she was still out with friends. The thought of her casually drinking cocktails while I was here, unraveling our life, made my blood boil. I had to talk to her, get her side of the story. If there even was another side. "Do you have any proof?" I asked Derek. "Something besides just a vague conversation you overheard?" Derek fumbled with his phone, scrolling through his messages until he pulled up a blurry photo of Emma at what looked like a fancy restaurant. She was seated across from a man I didn't recognize. Definitely not one of our friends or anyone from her work that I'd met. They were leaning in close, her hand resting on his arm. "Who's this?" I asked, pointing at the guy. "His name's Marcus," Derek replied. "He's not just some random guy. He's the one Emma was talking to on the phone." I looked him up after I saw them together. Turns out he's got a bit of a reputation around town. Loan shark, shady deals, that sort of thing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma had always been responsible with our finances. We had a mortgage, a bit of credit card debt like everyone else, but nothing that would have led her to someone like Marcus. Or at least that's what I thought. Derek's revelation left me with more questions than answers. Why would Emma get mixed up with a guy like that? What did she owe him? And most importantly, how long had she been living this double life without me noticing? As if sensing my thoughts, Derek added, "Look, man, I'm not here to make things worse. I just thought you should know what you're up against. If you want to talk to her, I'd suggest doing it soon. I don't know what kind of timeline we're dealing with, but I've got a bad feeling about this." Just as Derek finished speaking, my phone buzzed again. It was Emma, finally checking in after hours of silence. "Hey babe, just finished dinner with the girls. Heading home now. See you soon. Red heart." The casual tone of her message made my skin crawl. How could she act like nothing was wrong? I glanced at Derek, who had seen the text pop up over my shoulder. "Guess you've got some explaining to do," he muttered. I didn't respond. Couldn't. All I could think about was the confrontation waiting to happen when Emma walked through that door. I could picture it in my head. The look of shock on her face when I showed her what I knew, the panic when she realized Derek was still here. A few minutes later, I heard Emma's car pull into the driveway. Derek stiffened, and I felt my pulse quicken. There was no turning back now. The truth, whatever it was about to come spilling out. The front door creaked open, and Emma's voice floated into the house. "Tom, I'm back," she called out, her tone light and cheerful. She hadn't seen Derek yet. I took a deep breath and stepped forward to meet her in the hallway. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma's eyes widened slightly as she saw Derek standing behind me. For a moment, there was just a flicker of something on her face. Surprise, maybe even fear. Then, she masked it with a confused smile. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between the two of us. "We know about you and Derek," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "And we know about Marcus." The color drained from Emma's face, and her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely rattled. And that's when I knew whatever was going on, it was much bigger than just an affair. The silence was suffocating. Emma stood there, frozen in place, her eyes darting between me and Derek. I could see her trying to piece together a response, but there was no quick excuse that could explain away the mess unraveling in front of her. "Tom, I don't know what he told you, but," she began, her voice shaky. "Save it." I cut her off, holding up a hand. "I've already seen the texts, Emma. The pictures. Derek's told me everything. Well, almost everything." Her eyes flared with a mixture of anger and desperation. "What exactly did he tell you?" she demanded, her gaze shifting sharply toward Derek. Derek stepped forward, his voice low and tense. "I told him about Marcus, about the money you owe him, about the shady stuff I overheard. This isn't just about you and me anymore, Emma. It's about who you're mixed up with." Emma's expression faltered, and for a split second, there was a crack in her composure. But she quickly regained her footing, crossing her arms and adopting a defiant stance. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "You shouldn't have come here, Derek. This has nothing to do with Tom." "I beg to differ," I said, stepping in. "You're my wife, Emma. Whatever you've been hiding, it has everything to do with me." Her face softened, but not in a way that gave me any comfort. It was like she was trying to put on a sympathetic act, like you would for a child who didn't understand the gravity of a situation. "Tom, I can explain," she said quietly. "But you have to understand, I did what I did to protect us." I could feel my blood boiling. Protect us? That was a word I didn't expect to hear in this context. I tried to stay calm, but my voice betrayed the fury bubbling up inside. "Protect us," I repeated. "By cheating on me? By meeting up with a loan shark? Explain how any of that is protecting us." Emma glanced at Derek, who was glaring at her with a look of disgust, before returning her attention to me. "It's not what you think," she insisted. "Yes, I was seeing Derek, but I didn't get involved with Marcus because I wanted to. It was a necessity. You don't know the kind of trouble we're in." "We?" I scoffed. "You got yourself into this. Don't try to drag me down with you." She took a step toward me, her eyes pleading. "No, Tom, you don't understand. The reason I was meeting with Marcus, it was because of your debt." I froze, my mind reeling. "My debt? What are you talking about?" She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Do you remember last year when your business hit that rough patch? We were on the brink of losing everything. Our house, our savings. I took out a loan to keep us afloat. A loan that you didn't know about. But I was desperate, Tom. I did it to protect us." I struggled to process what she was saying. It was true that my business had gone through a rough period, but I thought we'd pulled through it together. I had no idea Emma had taken such drastic steps behind my back. "And Marcus?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The loan came from him," Emma confessed. "It was supposed to be a temporary solution, just to keep us going until things picked up again. But I couldn't pay it back in time. The interest kept piling up, and I was in over my head. That's when I started meeting with him, trying to negotiate something, anything. And Derek? I asked, glaring at him. Where does he fit into all of this? Emma glanced back at Derek, her expression a mix of guilt and something else, perhaps regret. I met Derek around the same time, she said softly. I guess you could say he was a distraction from everything that was going on. I know it was wrong. I know I betrayed you, but it wasn't supposed to get this far. None of it was. Derek shook his head in disbelief. So I was just some fling to help you cope with your financial problems? He spat. I thought we had something real, Emma, but I guess I was just a pawn in your messed up game. Emma winced, but she didn't deny it. It wasn't like that, she said, though the conviction in her voice was fading. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I was just lost. I didn't know whether to feel sympathy or rage. Emma's confession felt like a sucker punch, knocking the wind out of me. It wasn't just that she had lied or cheated. She had taken us down a path that put our entire lives at risk, and she had done it all behind my back. Emma, this is serious, I said, my voice barely steady. You're saying we owe money to a guy like Marcus? How much are we talking? She hesitated, her gaze falling to the floor. It's not just the original loan, she admitted. With the interest and late fees, it's about 50 grand now. The room seemed to close in around me. $50,000. That was more than just a bump in the road. It was a financial disaster. And it wasn't just money that worried me. If Marcus was as dangerous as Derek claimed, then we could be in serious trouble. As if to confirm my fears, Emma spoke again, her voice barely audible. He's been making threats, she said. He told me if I didn't come up with the money soon, he'd come after you. The weight of her words crashed over me like a tidal wave. It was no longer just about betrayal or financial problems. This was a matter of safety. I had been blindsided by my own wife, dragged into a web of lies and danger without even knowing it. And now I was the one facing the consequences. Derek, who had been silent for the past few moments, finally spoke up. You should have told him sooner, Emma, he said, his voice cold. But I guess it's too late for that now. I stared at Emma, a mixture of anger, fear, and betrayal coursing through me. She had taken us to the brink, and I wasn't sure there was a way out. But one thing was clear. I couldn't just sit back and let Marcus dictate our fate. I took a deep breath and turned toward Derek. You know where this guy hangs out? I asked. Derek nodded slowly, catching on to the determined look in my eyes. Yeah, I know where to find him. Good, I replied. Then let's go have a chat with Marcus. I didn't know what I expected to happen when we found Marcus, but I felt like I had to do something. Anything to take control of this situation. Sitting at home, fuming and letting the weight of everything crush me wasn't an option. I needed answers, and I needed to see the man who held my life in his hands. Derek and I drove in tense silence, Emma having stayed behind. Part of me didn't trust her not to alert Marcus that we were coming, but Derek assured me that she seemed too rattled to make any rash moves. He guided us to an upscale bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that catered to those who wanted to hide in plain sight. This is one of his favorite spots, Derek explained as we pulled into the dimly lit parking lot. He likes to keep a low profile, but people who need to find him know where to look. The inside of the bar was quiet, with only a few scattered patrons and the low hum of background music. I scanned the room, my heart pounding as we moved toward the back where a row of booths lined the wall. That's when I saw him. Marcus was exactly how I'd pictured him. Clean-cut, well-dressed, but with an air of menace that set my nerves on edge. He looked up from his drink as we approached, his expression shifting from disinterest to curiosity. He didn't seem surprised to see us. Well, Marcus said, his tone amused as he leaned back in his seat. I didn't expect to see you here, Tom. Or you, Derek. Didn't think you two were exactly on speaking terms. The way he said it, with that sly smirk on his face, made my skin crawl. It was as if he had been expecting this moment all along, as if he had been pulling the strings and we were just dancing to his tune. I'm not here for small talk, I snapped, doing my best to keep my voice steady. We need to discuss the debt Emma owes you. What's it going to take to make this go away? Marcus's smirk widened, and he took a leisurely sip of his drink before setting it down on the table. Ah, straight to business. I respect that. But you see, it's not just about the money, Tom. It's about the principle. Your wife made a deal, and she failed to hold up her end. That puts her, and by extension, you, in a difficult position. I clenched my fists, struggling to maintain my composure. We'll pay what we owe, I said through gritted teeth. Just give us some time. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Time? That's not exactly something I'm in a generous mood to offer. In fact, your wife has already had more than enough time. But there is one thing that could make me reconsider. And what's that? I asked warily, not liking where this was going. Marcus's gaze flicked over to Derek before returning to me. A favor, he said slowly, as if savoring the word. I've got a little problem that needs dealing with. If you take care of it for me, I might be willing to forgive some of that debt. The alarm bells in my head rang loud and clear. I knew enough to understand that doing a favor for a man like Marcus wasn't going to be simple or legal. It was the kind of offer that would only drag us deeper into the muck. But his next words caught me off guard. Your friend here, Marcus continued, nodding toward Derek, has been keeping a few secrets of his own. I didn't realize until recently that he's been skimming from some side deals we made. Now, I'm a reasonable guy, I could overlook it. Or you could take care of this issue for me, and I'll call it even. I glanced over at Derek, who had gone pale. What is he talking about? I asked, my voice cold. Derek shook his head vehemently. He's lying, he spat. I never stole from him. This is just his way of manipulating you. Don't listen to him, Tom. Marcus chuckled. Believe what you want, but I don't need to make up lies. Derek's been cutting deals behind my back for months. I've got proof if you want to see it. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is, he betrayed me, and now you've got a choice to make. I was trapped. On one hand, if I believed Marcus, I'd be condemning Derek, someone I already had little trust in, to an uncertain fate. On the other hand, if Derek was telling the truth, then Marcus was trying to play us against each other. Either way, I felt like I was standing on a thin rope, and one wrong move would send me plunging into the abyss. Why are you doing this? I demanded. Why involve me in whatever game you're playing? Because it's fun, Marcus replied with a wicked grin. And because you, my friend, are more interesting than you think. I've been watching you for a while now, and I've got a feeling you're capable of more than you realize. The audacity of his words left me speechless for a moment. It wasn't just a matter of money or revenge. Marcus seemed to be toying with us for his own amusement. I turned to Derek, whose expression had turned desperate. Tom, you've got to believe me, he pleaded. He's trying to turn us against each other. I didn't steal anything. I didn't know what to believe anymore. My life had gone from mundane to a chaotic web of lies and schemes in a matter of days. I felt like a puppet, with Marcus and Derek both tugging at the strings, each trying to pull me in a different direction. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. I'm not going to do anything until I see this so-called proof, I said firmly. If you've got evidence, show it to me. Marcus's grin faded slightly, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. Fair enough, he said, pulling out his phone and tapping on the screen. He handed it to me, displaying a series of text messages and financial records. As I scrolled through the evidence, a sinking feeling took hold. It was all there. Transactions linked to Derek, messages coordinating deals without Marcus's involvement. I looked up at Derek, who seemed to deflate in front of my eyes. His face was a mixture of anger, shame, and fear. It's not what it looks like, Tom, he said, his voice breaking. I had to do it. I was in a tight spot. You've got to understand. But I didn't understand. And suddenly, it hit me, the real reason Derek had come to me in the first place. He wasn't trying to help me out of some sense of guilt or loyalty. He was trying to protect himself, to use me as a shield in the mess he'd made. I handed the phone back to Marcus, my mind racing. The betrayal stung deeper than anything I'd felt before. I had come here thinking I was dealing with a problem between Emma and me, but now I realized there was another layer to this whole ordeal. one that involved the person I had thought was helping me. "You've made your point," I said to Marcus, my voice cold. "Now, what happens next?" The room was thick with tension, the kind that makes the air hard to breathe. Derek stood there, looking like a man whose last hope had just been stripped away. Marcus watched us both with that unsettlingly calm expression, like a cat toying with a mouse. "I think the question is, what are you going to do next?" Marcus said, his voice smooth and measured. "You've seen the evidence. You know who you're dealing with. So, Tom, are you going to do the smart thing and cut Derek loose? Or are you going to let yourself get dragged down with him?" Derek's eyes widened, and he took a step closer to me. "Tom, you don't understand. He's manipulating you. Yes, I made some side deals, but it was to pay off my own debts. It had nothing to do with you. Don't let him turn us against each other." His desperation was palpable, but it wasn't enough to sway me. He had lied just like Emma had lied, and now I was supposed to risk my own safety for him? The betrayal was eating away at me, and I could feel my anger shifting toward Derek, who had dragged me into this mess as much as Emma had. "Why didn't you come clean earlier?" I snapped at him. "If you were in trouble, why didn't you tell me the truth from the start instead of spinning this whole story about Emma's debts?" Derek's face flushed with frustration. "I thought I could handle it myself," he admitted, his voice wavering. "But things got out of hand. I didn't want to involve you in my problems. But then Emma's situation came up, and I thought we could help each other. I'm sorry, man. I really am." It was hard to believe anything coming out of his mouth. I felt like a fool for ever thinking he was genuinely trying to help. I turned back to Marcus, who was watching with that same amused expression. "If I let Derek go," I said cautiously, "what happens to the debt?" Marcus's smile grew. "I can be reasonable. Take care of the problem and I'll wipe your slate clean. I'm not a monster, Tom. I can appreciate loyalty, even if it comes a bit late." Derek's panic was almost palpable. "You can't do this, Tom," he pleaded. "He's not going to let you walk away clean. Even if you get rid of me, he'll find some other way to keep you on the hook." "Enough," I shouted, my patience snapping. "I don't know who to believe anymore. But I do know one thing. I'm done being played by both of you." I turned to Marcus, my decision made. "I'll take care of Derek. But I need your word that once it's done, we're through. No more debts, no more favors." Marcus's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "You have my word," he said. "But be quick about it. The longer you wait, the more complicated things get." Derek looked like he was on the verge of collapse. "You're making a mistake, Tom," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Marcus isn't going to let you walk away. He's got his hooks in deep." I didn't respond. I was already mentally preparing for what needed to be done. I could deal with Marcus later, but first, I needed to put an end to Derek's involvement. As we walked out of the bar, I could feel Derek's eyes burning into my back. Once we were outside, he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the side of the building. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice frantic. "We can take him down together. I have information that could ruin Marcus. We could use it to get him off our backs for good." I yanked my arm free and stared at him. "And why should I trust you now?" I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "You've lied to me since this whole thing started. How do I know this isn't just another one of your games?" Derek's face twisted with frustration. "Because if I go down, I'm taking Marcus with me," he said. "And you too. He's got dirt on everyone he deals with. If you don't help me, he'll find a way to make sure you're next." It was a desperate gamble, but there was a glimmer of truth in his words. Marcus wasn't the type to let things go. Even if he promised to clear my debt, who's to say he wouldn't use the knowledge of Emma's involvement or Derek's betrayal as leverage to keep me under his thumb? Before I could decide, Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was grainy and clearly taken from a hidden camera, but I could make out Marcus in the frame, talking to someone. It was a conversation about using loan repayments to funnel money into a side business, something clearly illegal. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my eyes widening. "I told you I've got dirt on him," Derek said. "Enough to bury him if we use it right. But I need your help, Tom. We can't do this alone. I stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities. I hadn't trusted Derek before, and I certainly didn't trust him now, but this was a game changer. If we could use this information to take Marcus down, maybe I could finally get out from under this whole mess. Maybe there was a way to come out on top after all. All right, I said slowly, my eyes locking onto Derek's. We'll try it your way. But if you're lying to me about this too, I swear. I'm not, Derek interrupted. We're in this together now, Tom. It's the only way out. We quickly formulated a plan. Derek would use his connections to set up a meeting with one of Marcus's business partners, someone who had enough influence to bring the entire operation crashing down if the right pressure was applied. The idea was to make Marcus think he had no choice but to walk away and clear the debt or risk exposure. It was a risky play, one that could backfire spectacularly if Marcus caught wind of what we were doing. But it felt like the only real option left. The stakes had risen to a level I never thought I'd find myself in. Betrayal upon betrayal, lies compounding with every step I took deeper into the shadows. As Derek and I made our way to the car, I couldn't help but wonder if I had just made a deal with the devil himself. There was no turning back now. I had to see this through to the end, for better or worse. And the way things were going, I was leaning heavily toward worse. As we prepared to set the plan in motion, the weight of what we were about to do settled in. It was dangerous, no doubt about it, but I had come too far to back down. If Derek's video was as incriminating as it seemed, we had leverage strong enough to make Marcus think twice about continuing to toy with us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek was still holding something back. The first step was contacting Marcus's business partner, a man named Vincent. According to Derek, Vincent had ties to Marcus's more questionable dealings, but was also the kind of person who wouldn't hesitate to protect his own interests if a scandal threatened his profits. Derek managed to set up a meeting for us at a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place where Vincent handled his more discreet transactions. We arrived at the warehouse at dusk, the sky turning a dark, bruised shade of purple. The large metal doors creaked open, and we were greeted by a couple of Vincent's men, who ushered us inside. It was a typical warehouse, cold, dimly lit, and filled with crates stacked up to the ceiling. Vincent stood near the center, his sharp eyes narrowing as we approached. "What's this about?" Vincent asked bluntly, not wasting any time on pleasantries. "I don't like surprises, and you've pulled me away from some important business." Derek stepped forward, holding up his phone with the video queued up and ready to play. "We've got evidence that Marcus has been running some off-the-books operations," he said, his voice steady but tense. "He's been siphoning money from your deals to fund his own side projects." Vincent's expression darkened. "You'd better not be wasting my time, Derek," he warned. "If this is some kind of trick." "It's not a trick," I cut in, my voice firmer than I felt. "We're here because we want Marcus to clear a debt. In exchange, we're willing to let this go and not bring you or your business into it." Vincent took the phone and watched the video in silence, his eyes narrowing with every second. When it finished, he looked back up at us, a mix of anger and calculation in his gaze. "So, you're saying I've got a rat in my operation," he said slowly. "And you two are offering to keep this quiet if I... what? Lean on Marcus for you?" Derek nodded. "Exactly. We're not asking for much. Just make him see reason and clear the debt." For a moment, I thought Vincent was going to laugh, but then his expression turned deadly serious. "And what's stopping me from just having the two of you taken care of right now?" he asked, gesturing to the two men standing behind us. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my neck. "Because we've made sure that there are copies of this video stored safely," I replied, praying that Derek had actually done that. "If anything happens to us, this footage gets sent to the authorities." Vincent stared at us for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right," he said at last. "I'll talk to Marcus, but if this turns out to be some kind of double-cross, you'll be wishing you never stepped foot in my warehouse." "Understood. Understood," Derek and I said in unison. As we left the warehouse, I felt a twisted mix of relief and dread. We had managed to get Vincent's attention and put some pressure on Marcus, but I knew we had only bought ourselves a temporary reprieve. There was still the matter of Emma and what part she had played in all this. On the drive back, Derek broke the silence. "We did the right thing," he said, as if trying to convince himself as much as me. "Marcus isn't going to come after us now. He's got too much to lose." But I wasn't so sure. "How did you even get that video?" I asked, my suspicion finally spilling over. "And don't give me some vague answer. I want the truth." Derek hesitated, glancing over at me. "Okay, fine," he said, exhaling sharply. "I wasn't exactly upfront about everything. Marcus had me doing some work for him, nothing major, just some money pickups, arranging meetings, that sort of thing. I came across the video by accident when I was checking through some security footage to cover my own tracks. I realized how useful it could be, so I kept a copy." I felt a fresh wave of anger rising. "So you were involved with him all along?" I asked, my voice edged with accusation. "You put me in this position to save your own skin, didn't you?" Derek didn't deny it. "At first, yes," he admitted, his tone defensive. "But once I saw how deep you were getting pulled into this, I figured we could use the leverage to get us both out. I know I should have been honest from the start, but I didn't see any other way. It felt like a betrayal on top of betrayal. I had thought Emma's affair was the worst thing that could happen to me, but now it seemed like every person I trusted was using me as a pawn. I didn't even know if I could trust myself anymore, given the choices I had made." We didn't speak for the rest of the drive, each of us lost in our own thoughts. By the time we arrived back at my house, night had fallen, and the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. As we stepped out of the car, a familiar voice called out from the shadows. "Tom, we need to talk." It was Emma. She emerged from the darkness, her face pale and eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. I hadn't expected to see her again so soon. In fact, I wasn't sure I wanted to see her at all. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my tone cold and guarded. She glanced at Derek before focusing on me. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about Marcus. There's more to this than you realize." My patience was wearing thin. "What more could there possibly be?" I demanded. "I know about your affair. I know about the debt. I know about the lies. What else is there, Emma?" Her gaze didn't waver. "The reason Marcus came after me wasn't just about the money," she said quietly. "He wanted something else. Something that involves you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I could only stare at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma swallowed hard. "Marcus and I weren't strangers when we met," she confessed. "He was someone from my past. Someone who had a grudge against you long before we ever crossed paths." I felt the ground shift beneath me as the pieces of the puzzle started to rearrange themselves in my mind. The whole thing, Emma's affair, the debt, Marcus's involvement, it wasn't a random series of events. It was personal, and I was at the center of it. Emma's revelation hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I had assumed that all of this, her affair, the debt, Marcus's threats, was just a tangled mess of bad decisions. But if what she said was true, it was something far more sinister. It was orchestrated. It was deliberate. "Explain," I demanded, my voice barely controlled. "What exactly is Marcus's grudge against me? How do you even know him?" Emma took a shaky breath and looked down, as if gathering the strength to reveal the truth. "Before you and I met, I dated Marcus for a while," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "We weren't serious, but when I broke things off, he didn't take it well. He started following me, harassing me. I managed to get him out of my life, but it seems he never really let go." Her words rang in my ears. I felt a sickening churn in my stomach as the implications set in. This wasn't just about money. Marcus was using Emma to get to me. But why involve me now? I asked, my frustration growing. If this was just some old grudge of his, why wait until now? Emma shook her head. It wasn't until I saw him again by chance that everything started up again. I didn't recognize him at first. He was using a different name. He found out about us, about our life together, and he saw it as an opportunity to get even. The affair, the debt, it was all part of his plan. I thought I could handle it, that if I paid him off, he would leave us alone. But I was wrong. The betrayal cut deeper than I had thought possible. I had been Marcus's target all along, and Emma had been his weapon. It didn't matter whether she had fallen for him again willingly or had been manipulated. The result was the same. I had been dragged into his twisted game. "You should have told me from the beginning," I said through gritted teeth. "We could have handled it together. Instead, you kept me in the dark and made me part of his scheme." Emma's eyes glistened with tears. "I know I should have," she whispered, "but I was scared. Scared of what you'd think of me. Scared of what Marcus might do if he found out I told you. I thought I could protect you by keeping it a secret." Derek, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "If Marcus has a personal vendetta against Tom, this isn't just about money anymore," he said, his tone grim. "We need to use the information we have to not only clear the debt, but to put an end to Marcus's hold over both of you." For once, I agreed with him. I wasn't about to let Marcus's twisted obsession continue to destroy my life. It was time to fight back, and we had the evidence to do it. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, formulating a plan on the fly. "We'll confront Marcus directly, but we won't do it alone. We'll involve Vincent. If we can show him just how much of a liability Marcus is, how personal this grudge really is, maybe we can push him to cut Marcus loose and take his own measures." It was a dangerous move, but we had little choice. Marcus was unlikely to just walk away quietly, and we needed the support of someone powerful enough to keep him at bay. We arranged another meeting with Vincent, presenting him not only with the video but with the new information about Marcus's past with Emma and his obsession with me. Vincent listened carefully, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. "This isn't the kind of business I want to be associated with," he said, his voice laced with irritation. "Marcus has been bringing his personal vendettas into what should be straightforward deals. That's bad for business." He gave us a calculating look. "But if I'm going to clean up his mess, I need more than just your word. I need concrete proof that Marcus has been jeopardizing my interests." Derek produced a folder containing financial records that showed Marcus's side dealings and the laundering of money through various accounts. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Vincent's scowl deepened as he reviewed the documents. "This is enough," he said at last, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Marcus won't be a problem for you anymore. Leave him to me." It was a relief, but it felt hollow. I still had to confront Emma about what this meant for us. As we walked out of the meeting, the silence between us grew heavier. We had dealt with Marcus for now, but there was no undoing what had happened. Emma and I still had a long way to go, and the trust between us was shattered. "Tom, I know you might never forgive me," Emma said quietly, breaking the silence. "But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I admitted. "But what I do know is that I'm done with secrets and lies. If there's any chance for us, it starts with complete honesty." She nodded, her expression full of regret. "No more secrets," she promised, "no matter what happens next." As I watched her, I couldn't help but wonder if our relationship could survive such a brutal test. It wouldn't be easy to rebuild, but perhaps there was a sliver of hope that we could start over. A few days later, I received a call from Vincent. "It's done," he said without preamble. "Marcus won't be bothering you or anyone else again. Consider the debt cleared." The relief that washed over me was immense, but it was tempered by everything that had been lost in the process. I had emerged from this ordeal free of Marcus's grip, but I wasn't sure I had truly won. Emma and I were still living under the shadow of betrayal, and it would take time for those wounds to heal, if they ever did. As I hung up the phone, I took a deep breath and looked out the window. The sky was clear, the sunlight streaming in through the glass. It felt like the first time in weeks that I could finally see things clearly. There were no more hidden motives or manipulative games, only the raw, unvarnished truth. Emma joined me at the window, and we stood there in silence, side by side. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or resentment when I looked at her. What I felt was a fragile kind of acceptance. We had both made mistakes and we were both paying the price. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to move forward, together or apart, whatever the future held. Only time would tell. But at least now I was finally free to face it.